So I've broken this down into a bunch of fill layers that I can, easily mask by using the that lock option here up in the locks, the lock transparent pixels. So I've broken out panels like the ground here. Looks like I've got some overspill I didn't notice from the bottom. I need to go fix, or else I'm going to have some problems. So I'll go and correct that in a second. I'm just going to get rid of this one that I'm not using anymore. I've got the outer frame, and if you notice, the one underneath it just overspills all over the place on it, and that might be what's happening with the other one on the bottom, so it may not be a problem. I've got the bolts, kind of went with a blue tone. I saved it here, threw in some bolts in there, so I've got that. Pieces out front on the ground, bolts, that ring up top here using the same blue tone. And so now I'm going to be able to lock all these, and as I paint on them, it's just going to be faster and easier for me to get them to the sort of the next level. And then the finalizing I'm going to do on top of the whole layers and just paint over everything, because at that point it should be pretty close. It's just kind of tweak stuff at that point. So here's the one thing I ran into a problem with is my chains. So far all of my line work is just that, it's line work, but the chains are actually a solid mass of lines in a sense. I can't paint between the lines, and it's up in my sketch area here. So I've got it up in the sketches, and being up in the sketches, I obviously can't, I don't want to go and color it up here, but I can, and I'm going to do another unique um, thing with it that'll make it quite interesting. One, I could go and lock it and paint right into them and paint the color into these. Here's another way of doing it though. I'm going to leave them just solid black as they are. I'm going to add a layer above, so I dropped in a new layer. And if I paint on this layer now, it's going to be interesting. So let's just do just something totally crazy. I'm just going to paint. I'm painting obviously over everything. It makes no sense. What I want to do is I want to do what's called a clipping mask, and I'm going to clip this new layer that I created, layer 22. I'm going to clip it with the one below. In other words, only where there's something in the layer below will it show up in layer 22. You can right click on it and create clipping mask. The quicker way of doing that is you hold down Alt and put your mouse in between the layers, and you can see that icon popping up. And when that icon pops up, I'm just going to click, and you can see it moves over to the right, gives me a little arrow, basically says this is being clipped like that. You can have as many clipping layers being clipped as with one as possible as you want. So you can now see that the red is only showing up where the chain is. This is going to make it really easy for me to be able to paint the chain. And actually, red's kind of, dangerous looking, isn't it? So it makes it really easy for me to go in and paint on that chain, because I really don't have to paint on the chain. I just need to touch the edges to get highlights and things and going on. So that's how I'm going to deal with the chain at this point. And I'll come back to that, and I probably don't want it all red. So I'm going to go Control A, which will select everything, and I'm going to hit delete, and I'm going to go Control D to deselect everything. And I'm just going to leave that clipping mask, that clipping layer in there. So when I come back and start highlighting the chains in kind of a final pass, I'm not going to bother now, unless I wanted them a color. Maybe I wanted them that same blue tone, then I could easily, drop that blue tone on them if I want to have sort of a cooled down blue value. And I could easily fill all those in. Again, what's crazy is you get rid of the clipping mask, it's just this big mess. But it's not when you clip it. So it's going to make my life much easier when it comes down to trying to get a little bit of highlights. Right now they're getting lost, and when I'm have to pick up a little bit of a highlight almost every single um, you know ring in the chain, and just try and get them to pop a little bit so that we can identify them as a chain, because right now they really don't identify as a chain at all. Even in black, they're getting lost against it. So I'll come back to that. I'll just leave them black for now, and I'll come back to that part. So, now that I have some of this done, we can see where we might need hotter values. These metal bits probably need a couple hotter values on them to make them pop and everything. Certainly the bars do. And the method we were using before works. But problem is you start to paint shadows and highlights, you want to use color in your shadows and highlights. You really don't want to be painting shadows and highlights with just value changes of the color you're using. You don't want to just sort of tones of that. So we want to be able to generate sort of what would be, I guess, sunlight kind of values, oranges, these yellows kind of color, and use those in our highlights to make it pop. And then in our shadow areas, we want to start brushing in some cooler values, some blues, greens, things of that nature, depending on what you're going for, to try and make it feel a little more natural with color. And so I'm probably going to do a bit more work in the using the method that I'm currently using because it's getting me some lighting for free. But when it comes down to that final tweaking, I'm going to want to start painting over everything and start adding in some of those true nice colors. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go around and I'm going to use some variations of my colors and little tonal changes. And I want to start brushing some of those in to make them look a little more natural. And again, I'm going to go right back down to my color variations. And maybe I'll start on the framework area here, and it's locked off now. I've got the color I've put off to the side here. You want to use a color off to the side and not just pick off, because as you pick off, it's going to get you color changes based on the lighting as well, which might be exactly what you're after. And I'm going to start using a soft, like a lighter brush. So in this case, I'll take it down to 20%. With a 20% value to it. Now, the other thing you can do with your brushes is we can start manipulating the actual transfer style. And this is where we're probably going to want to do this. Right now, if you click on this folder here, it'll open up your brush palettes over here, and you can get to them here over on the side. And you'll notice this is the settings for a brush. So shape dynamics is turned on to pen pressure, so we're getting that nice shape dynamic going on. It's doing some smoothing on it, so it's trying to smooth out the brush and making sure it's looking smooth. We can add all kinds of things, but we want to go down to transfer, and we want to make sure that transfer's on. And you can see it fading off at the end now. So we can say minimum pressure and take that minimum pressure down if you like. And what that'll get us is it'll get us lines that blend on and off. Here, I'll do this on my swatches layer that isn't locked. And you can see now as I brush it in and out and press harder, I can get a variation of weight on the brush as well. And that's going to help a lot getting sort of blend offs on our brush strokes as we try and brush in a little bit of color into our images. So I'm going to still use the weight pretty low. And I'm going to be working on, I think I'm going to take some of this darks and just kind of brush it in here. And I'm going to go back down to my layer that's locked and then start considering just sort of, some color variation. And it'll start having that little more wood grainy kind of feel. Maybe my brush a bit smaller. And getting some, color variation or tonal variations going on in my browns right now. We could even add some color into it. If you're good at working with color, you could start adding some color in this way, and it would certainly be good. Now, I suck at color. I really do. I'm just not a good color person. So what I do is I tend to find images on the web that I really like, and I steal the color out of them. Yep, that's exactly what I do. So over on this side, I'm going to take it and maybe try and see if I can add some blues into there. Got darks, but if I take it over into some blues, will it look right? Because it's on the shadow side. And it certainly does. Looks pretty good. So I can get variation of tone going on in there. It's looking pretty good. Maybe even a little bit of this blue in the shadows in the front may actually kind of help it a little bit. So a little bit of variations. You can see it starts bringing out that, sort of changes in wood color overall. And so I want to be able to brush some of those nice changes into things, and I can just build it up as strong as I want it because now my brush is weighted. If I push hard, I get more of it. If I push less, and I also get a thick thin going on, so I can get a little more, that nice variations in values. And it starts bringing up those tones more and more. So that's something I'm going to go through now and do overall, and start trying to get some variation of these tones using blues in the shadow sides. And again, I can even go to warms in the light side and see what that does for us. So I could even take this into some lighter colors, maybe not that, maybe into the oranges more. Let's see what that does. Yeah, that might work if I go a little lighter or something. It's experimentation and just sort of playing around and using your eye. Again, go back to some of your reference materials, steal some of the colors out of it, and it could help. So that color is actually giving me some nice options. I'm just going to go back up to my swatches, 100% weight here, and save that color. And I'm using that then. I had to hit it quite a few times because I've got pressure sensitivity on, so I had to lean on it. So it's giving me a little bit of the oranges. Maybe I could try a bit more later on and see as I get there. So I'm going to save that one for my warms and start trying to paint a bit of that in. So I'm going to go back now and do all of the wood pieces and try and again get a little more flavor happening in the wood on this sort of base underpainting method that we're using, painting underneath our lighting.